I can still hear his voice, sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet of the night. Ethan gripped my hand so tightly it almost hurt. His eyes, usually calm and steady, were blazing with something I'd never seen before: fear. "Claire," he said, his jaw tight, "whatever happens, stay in the car. Lock the doors. Trust me." My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't teasing. He was deadly serious, and it terrified me more than anything else could have in that moment. I wanted to ask him why. I wanted him to explain what he meant by whatever happens. But his hand slipped away before I could speak, and I watched him step out into the cool night air, walking toward his parents' house as if he were heading into a battlefield. I sat frozen, my fingers trembling as I clicked the lock button on the inside of the door. The sound of the doors sealing shut echoed in my chest like a warning bell. Something about the way he said it, "Trust me," felt less like a request and more like a plea. And that's when the dread began to settle in. I'd been with Ethan Marshall for nearly 2 years, and I thought I knew him. He was protective, kind, and fiercely loyal. But in that moment, as I watched his tall figure move toward the warm glow spilling from his parents' windows, I realized there were pieces of him I didn't understand, pieces he hadn't let me see. You don't forget a look like that. You don't forget the way the person you love seems to change in an instant, how their face hardens, how their shoulders square like they're preparing for war. I should have trusted my instincts right then, should have known that something was waiting for us inside that house. But instead, I sat there in the darkened car, clutching the steering wheel as if it could steady me, and told myself I was overthinking. The thing is, it wasn't supposed to be like this. That night was supposed to be about love, about family, about taking the next big step in our lives together. Ethan had finally decided it was time for me to meet his parents. I'd been both nervous and excited all week. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted them to see me the way Ethan saw me. But as soon as we pulled into the driveway, that excitement vanished. Ethan's words had been so specific, so final. Stay in the car. Lock the doors. No one gives instructions like that unless they're expecting danger. Danger. From what? From his own family? I tried to laugh it off in my head, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Through the windshield, I could see the house. It looked normal enough, a well-kept 2-story home with flower beds in the front yard and a wreath on the door. The kind of house you'd expect to see in a holiday commercial. But instead of warmth, all I felt was cold. The windows glowed softly, but they seemed like eyes watching me, waiting for me to blink first. And Ethan, he didn't look back once. He just kept walking. His shadow stretched across the driveway as he climbed the porch steps, his shoulders tense. Then, without hesitation, he disappeared through the front door. The silence after the door shut was unbearable. I was alone in the car with nothing but my own thoughts swirling like a storm. My fingers hovered over my phone. Should I text him, call him, tell him to come back? But his voice replayed in my head, firm and unshakable. Trust me. So I stayed. I locked the doors, and I waited. Minutes passed like hours. My chest rose and fell too quickly, my body restless but pinned to the seat. I tried to distract myself by glancing at the house next door, at the empty street, at anything but the front door where Ethan had vanished. But my eyes kept drifting back, expecting him to reappear. He didn't. And then, 10 minutes later, when I finally dared to lean toward the window and look, my entire world tilted. Because what I saw through that glass was something I could never have imagined. Something that made me question not just who Ethan's parents really were, but who Ethan himself truly was. That was the moment everything changed. When I first agreed to meet Ethan's parents, I pictured something simple. Awkward small talk over dinner, polite smiles, maybe even an embarrassing childhood story or two. That's how it usually goes, right? Families aren't perfect, but they're supposed to welcome you when you're about to marry their son. For days, I'd been telling myself to relax. I rehearsed answers to questions I thought they might ask. What I did for work, what my family was like, how Ethan and I met. I even picked my outfit carefully, a soft navy dress that I thought said respectful without screaming, trying too hard. I wanted them to like me. More than that, I wanted them to understand why Ethan loved me, but the drive over already felt different. Ethan was quiet. Not the usual quiet where he was lost in thought or humming along with the radio, but heavy quiet, the kind that clings to the air and makes you nervous to break it. I tried a few times to lighten the mood. "Do you think they'll ask me if I can cook?" I asked, half laughing, because if they do, I might have to lie. He didn't smile. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Claire," he said softly, "just be yourself. Don't worry about impressing them." Something in the way he said it made me uneasy. I tried again, nudging his arm. "Come on, it can't be that bad." "You make it sound like I'm walking into an interrogation." His lips twitched in what might have been a smile, but it faded almost instantly. He just shook his head and kept driving. Looking back, that should have told me everything I needed to know. I didn't know much about his family. Ethan wasn't the type to share a lot of stories about his parents, and when he did, they were vague, surface-level things. His mom, Margaret, worked in accounting. His dad, Thomas, was a retired contractor. He had a younger sister named Lydia who was in college. That was it. No funny anecdotes, no warm childhood memories, nothing that gave me a sense of who they really were. The few times I'd tried to push, to ask what his parents were like, Ethan would change the subject. At first, I thought he was just private. But on that drive, I realized it was something else entirely. We pulled onto their street just as the sky turned dusky purple, the last bit of sunlight stretching thin across the rooftops. Their house was easy to spot. 2 stories, perfectly painted shutters, and flower beds lined up in precise rows. The kind of house that screamed perfection, like something out of a real estate brochure. And yet, looking at it, I felt a chill. It wasn't the house itself. It was the way Ethan stared at it. Like it wasn't home. Like it was something he had to conquer. I reached for his hand as he slowed in the driveway. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel. "Hey," I whispered, "it's just your parents. We'll be fine." That's when he turned to me, and for the first time that night, I saw raw fear in his eyes. Not nervousness, not embarrassment. Fear. That was the moment he said the words that would haunt me. "Whatever happens, stay in the car. Lock the doors. Trust me." My stomach dropped. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but his voice was too sharp, too certain. I swallowed hard and nodded, even though I didn't understand. He gave my hand one last squeeze and got out, his tall frame unfolding from the car as he started toward the porch. I stayed behind, clutching the steering wheel like it could anchor me. My gaze followed him as he approached the front door. That's when the curtain in the upstairs window shifted just slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a pale face, a young woman's face. She ducked away before I could get a good look, but my heart knew it was Lydia. I should have felt relieved. A sister peeking out to see who was arriving. Normal, right? But something about the way her eyes darted, the way she seemed almost desperate to look at me before hiding, sent another shiver down my spine. I exhaled slowly, telling myself I was imagining things. This was just nerves. People peek out of windows all the time. But deep down, something told me that the night wasn't going to be about dinner, or small talk, or awkward introductions. This night was going to be about survival. And it was only just beginning. The car felt like a cage the second Ethan disappeared inside the house. I'd locked the doors just like he told me, but the locks didn't make me feel safe. They only reminded me that he thought I needed protecting in the first place. My fingers drummed nervously against my lap. I could still see him through the window in the front room. He was hugging his mother. At first glance, it looked normal, just a son greeting his mom. But even from where I sat, something about her body language was wrong. Margaret didn't lean into the hug the way a mother usually would. She pulled back quickly, her hands still on his shoulders like she was holding him in place, studying him. Thomas appeared then, broad-shouldered, silver hair combed back neatly. He shook Ethan's hand, but it wasn't warm. It looked more like a silent power struggle, a test of strength. My throat tightened. I leaned forward, trying not to fog the glass with my breath. At the edge of the room, I caught sight of Lydia. Her long brown hair fell around her face as she peeked toward the door, her eyes wide. For a moment, her gaze flicked toward me through the window. She mouthed something, her lips moving quickly, but I couldn't make out the words. By the time I leaned closer, she'd turned away, as if she'd never looked at me at all. That's when I started to feel the shift. This wasn't just a tense family dinner. Something was boiling beneath the surface, and Ethan had known it before we even parked the car. That was why he'd given me those instructions. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to unbuckle my seatbelt and walk in there with him to prove I wasn't some fragile outsider who needed protecting. But fear has a way of freezing you in place. My hand stayed clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The house was too quiet from where I sat. No sound carried to the driveway, and that silence was worse than shouting. I could see them talking, their mouths moving in sharp lines, but I couldn't hear a word. And then it happened. A sudden movement. Ethan's arm jerking back as his father shoved him. My heart leapt into my throat. Margaret said something, her hand shooting up to her mouth, while Lydia pressed herself against the wall like she wanted to disappear. The thud of Ethan hitting the wall vibrated in my chest even though I hadn't heard it. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. My instinct screamed at me to run in there, to stand by him, to stop whatever was happening, but his words rang in my head. Whatever happens, stay in the car. Lock the doors. Trust me. Trust him. How could I sit there and do nothing while the man I loved was being cornered by his own family? I fumbled for my phone, ready to dial his number. My thumb hovered over the call button. But what would that do? He was only a few feet away, just beyond that window. If he picked up, would it only make things worse? Would they hear my voice and know I was watching? I pressed the phone to my chest, my pulse racing like I'd run a mile. My breath came fast, shallow. Every second felt longer than the last. Through the glass, I saw Ethan straighten, his hands rising in defense. He said something to his father, his face taut with anger. I couldn't read his lips this time. All I could see was his jaw clench, his fists tighten. Then Thomas's gaze shifted, slowly, deliberately, toward me. I froze. It was like he knew I was there, like he could see me despite the glare of the window in the distance. His lips curved in a smile that sent a chill down my spine. I ducked back instinctively, pressing my body low against the seat. My breath rattled in my chest. For a few seconds, I didn't dare move. When I dared to peek again, Thomas had turned back to Ethan. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something in that house was about to explode. 10 minutes had passed since Ethan told me to stay put. 10 minutes of silence, shadows, and rising dread. And I was about to break my promise, because whatever was happening in that house, it was no longer something I could ignore. My whole body felt like it was buzzing. My heart was thundering so loud I swore someone inside the house could hear it. I sat there, hunched low in the driver's seat, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. Ethan's words echoed in my head, pounding in rhythm with my pulse. Stay in the car. Lock the doors. Trust me. But how could I trust him when I'd just watched his own father shove him into a wall? How could I sit still when Lydia had mouthed something desperate at me, as if begging for help? My instinct screamed at me to move, to act, to do something. I lifted my phone again, my thumb trembling over the keypad. I could call 911, tell them I'd just witnessed a domestic dispute, maybe even an assault. But the thought of explaining that I was sitting in a locked car while my fiancé was inside being cornered made me feel sick. What if calling the police only made things worse for him? What if it set his father off completely? I stared at the glowing screen, torn between dialing and obeying. The silence of the street mocked me. No neighbors walking their dogs, no headlights gliding by, no one to witness what was happening inside that house but me. I was alone, and the weight of that truth crushed me. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. One inhale, one exhale, steady and slow, but it didn't work. My body wasn't listening to reason. My breaths came shallow and uneven, my chest rising and falling like I'd sprinted a marathon. Then came the sound that shattered me, a muffled crash from inside. Something, maybe furniture, slammed to the ground. I jolted upright, my eyes snapping back to the window. Ethan was on his feet, his face tense, his hands balled into fists. His father loomed inches away, pointing a finger at his chest, his mouth twisted in fury. Margaret hovered at the edge of the room, her hand clutching her necklace, her lips moving in what looked like a prayer. And Lydia Sweet, terrified Lydia was pressed against the wall again, her eyes darting toward me like I was her last hope. I couldn't take it anymore. The seatbelt clicked as I tore it off. The sound was deafening in the silence of the car, but I didn't care. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle, my chest tight with panic. Ethan had told me to stay. He had begged me to trust him. But what if trusting him meant letting something irreversible happen? I cracked the car door open just an inch. Cool night air rushed in, brushing my skin with a chill that made me shiver. My mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. What if I walked in and made things worse? What if I was stepping into something I wasn't meant to see? What if Ethan couldn't forgive me for disobeying him? But the louder question drowned them all out. What if I did nothing and lost him forever? That thought broke me. I pushed the door wider, sliding one foot onto the driveway. My knees felt weak, like they might buckle, but adrenaline shoved me forward. I glanced around, scanning the quiet street for any sign of life. Nothing. It was just me, the car, and that house. Another thud shook the walls inside, and I flinched. My body was moving before I could stop it, slipping out of the car completely. The night wrapped around me, heavy and cold. I shut the door carefully, praying the sound wouldn't carry. The house loomed ahead, its warm lights glowing too brightly like a cruel disguise. My heart pounded harder with every step I took toward the porch. My shoes crunched against the gravel, and I winced, suddenly hyper-aware of every noise. When I reached the bottom step, I froze. My hand hovered over the railing, my breath fogging in the air. From here, I could hear faint voices, raised, sharp. My stomach twisted. I should have turned back. I should have listened. But instead, I crept closer, one step at a time, until I reached the side of the porch where a window was cracked open just enough for me to hear. I leaned in, holding my breath, straining to catch their words. And that's when I saw it. Something inside the house that made every nerve in my body go rigid. Something that told me I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. The night air felt colder the closer I pressed against that house. My palms were slick, my knees trembling as I leaned toward the window, peering through the narrow crack where the curtain didn't quite meet the wall. And then I saw it. Ethan wasn't just arguing with his father, he was fighting him. Thomas had one hand gripping Ethan's collar, forcing him back against the wall. Ethan's face was flushed with fury, veins standing out along his neck as he shoved his father's arm away. But that wasn't the part that made my stomach lurch. On the floor between them lay a small wooden box. Its lid had been flung open, its contents spilled across the carpet. Old photographs, yellowed papers, something metallic glinting under the harsh light. Margaret was on her knees, clutching at the items with shaking hands, muttering something I couldn't hear. Lydia hovered nearby, pale as a ghost, her arms wrapped around herself as if she were freezing. My eyes darted back to the metallic object. At first, I thought it was a piece of jewelry. But when the light hit it again, I realized what it was. A gun. I slapped a hand. Over my mouth, biting down on a gasp. My body pressed flat against the siding of the house, heart hammering so hard I thought it would give me away. Thomas's voice cut through the muffled glass, harsh and sharp. "You should never have brought her here, Ethan. You've put us all at risk." My blood ran cold. Was he talking about me? Ethan's reply came fast, his voice breaking with anger. "Don't you dare drag Claire into this." "She doesn't know anything. She has nothing to do with your lies, Claire." He'd said my name. Hearing it in that room, tossed like a weapon, made me feel both tethered to him and exposed in a way I'd never felt before. Margaret snapped her head up, her face streaked with tears. "If she finds out, everything falls apart. Do you understand that?" Everything I stumbled back a step, my shoe scraping against the porch. Panic surged through me. What secret? What could be so dangerous that my very existence here was a threat? Inside, Thomas shoved Ethan again, harder this time. "You should have kept her away." "You don't protect her by lying. You protect her by leaving her out of this family for good." The words tore through me. But Ethan didn't falter. His voice rose, stronger now, defiant. "No, I'm done covering for you. Claire is my future, and she deserves the truth. If you touch her, I swear to God—" His fist tightened. "I'll never forgive you." For a moment, the room froze. Margaret's sobs quieted. Lydia's wide eyes darted between them. Thomas's chest heaved as he stared at his son, his hand twitching near the gun on the floor. That was when Lydia broke. Her voice, high and desperate, cracked the tension. "Stop it, please, just stop!" She rushed forward, throwing herself between Ethan and her father, her arms outstretched. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to Ethan. "You have to take her and leave, before it's too late. Before it's too late." The words struck me like a physical blow. My breath came short and sharp, my body shaking as if those words were meant for me, too. I couldn't stand still anymore. My hand pressed against the siding of the house as I pulled myself upright. Every instinct told me to run into that room, to stand beside Ethan, but fear locked me in place. And then, just as my knees buckled, Thomas's eyes flicked again. Toward the window. Toward me. Our gazes met through the glass. It was only a second, but it felt endless. His lips curved into that same unsettling smile I'd seen earlier. The kind of smile that said he wasn't surprised. The kind of smile that told me he'd known I was watching all along. The blood drained from my face. My body turned to stone. Inside, Ethan followed his father's gaze. His head whipped toward the window, his eyes locking with mine. And in that instant, I saw the truth in his face. This wasn't just about a family argument. This wasn't just about secrets. This was about survival. Because whatever was in that box, whatever truth his parents were hiding, it was dangerous enough that they were willing to destroy their own son to keep it buried. And now they knew I'd seen it too. The moment Ethan's eyes met mine, through that window, everything shifted. His face drained of color, his expression torn between fury and fear. He didn't hesitate. He shoved past his father, grabbed Lydia by the arm, and pulled her out of the way. His lips moved in a single command I could read even without hearing. Go. And then he was moving. Toward me. Toward the door. I stumbled back from the window, my breath ragged, my legs weak. I didn't know whether to run to the car or stand frozen on the porch. My body wasn't listening to reason anymore. The door burst open, and Ethan charged out, his chest heaving, his shirt wrinkled from his father's grip. He didn't stop to explain. He grabbed my hand, his fingers crushing mine, and pulled me down the steps. "Claire, get in the car!" Now his voice was low, urgent, but unshakable. I wanted to ask him what was happening. I wanted to demand answers. But the look in his eyes told me this wasn't the time. My body obeyed before my brain could catch up. I scrambled into the passenger seat as Ethan slid into the driver's side, slamming the door. The engine roared to life, and the tires screeched against the driveway as he peeled away from the house. My head whipped back just long enough to see his parents standing in the doorway, Margaret clutching her necklace like a talisman, Thomas glaring, unflinching. Lydia stood behind them, her face pale, her hands trembling as she reached toward us like she wanted to follow, and then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness of the street as we sped away. The silence inside the car was unbearable. My chest rose and fell too fast, my breath loud in the confined space. My hands shook where they rested on my knees. Finally, I found my voice. "Ethan, what was that? What's in that box? Why were they—" My words choked off, swallowed by the knot in my throat. His grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. His jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the road. For a long moment, he didn't answer. The hum of the engine filled the silence between us, heavy and suffocating. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, pained. "It doesn't matter. Not right now. All that matters is that you're safe. The word stung, because I didn't feel safe, not even a little. I felt like I'd been dragged into something massive and dark, something that wasn't mine to carry. But now I had no choice. I turned toward him, my voice breaking. "Ethan, I need to know the truth. I can't just pretend I didn't see what I saw. I saw your father. I saw the gun. I saw Claire." His voice snapped sharper this time, and it startled me. His eyes flicked toward me, then back to the road. "I promise I'll tell you. But not tonight. Please. Trust me one more time, trust." That word again. I sank back against the seat, silent. My heart still raced, my stomach twisted with unease. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Something stronger. Loyalty. Love. The kind that makes you sit in a locked car because the man you love begs you to. The kind that makes you follow him into the unknown, even when every instinct tells you to run the other way. We drove for miles in silence, past neighborhoods, past gas stations glowing faintly in the night, past the places where normal couples were laughing over dinner or watching movies together. My world had shifted. I wasn't just Ethan's fiancé anymore. I was someone who had seen the darkness in his family, someone who was tied to his secret whether I wanted to be or not. When we finally stopped, at a quiet overlook just outside of town, Ethan killed the engine. The sudden stillness was deafening. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the steering wheel, his shoulders shaking. I reached out, laying my hand gently on his back. His body was tense, rigid. "You don't have to tell me everything tonight," I whispered, my throat tight. "But please don't shut me out. Whatever this is, whatever your family's hiding, I'd rather face it with you than watch you face it alone." He lifted his head slowly, his eyes shining in the dim light. For the first time that night, I saw something break in him. Not fear, not anger, vulnerability. "I didn't want you to see that side of them," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to know how dangerous they really are. But now you do, and I can't take it back." I squeezed his hand, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Then we deal with it together." That was the lesson burned into me that night. Love isn't just about romance or laughter or promises of forever. Sometimes love is about trust in the darkest moments, about choosing to stand beside someone even when it terrifies you. I don't know what secrets the marshals are still hiding. I don't know what was really in that box, or why Margaret wept like the world was ending, or why Thomas looked at me like I'd already signed my own death sentence. But I do know this. Whatever happens next, Ethan and I are bound by more than love now. We're bound by survival. And survival changes everything. And that's the night that changed everything. The night I realized that love isn't just about fairy tales or perfect dinners with family. Sometimes it's about trust when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. I don't know what the future holds for Ethan and me, but I know one thing for certain. After that night, we'll never be the same. If this story pulled you in, if it made your heart race the way mine did living through it, make sure to like this video so more people can find it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have stayed in the car or gone inside? And if you want more true, chilling stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the scariest secrets are hidden in plain sight.